Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
The series is the 613. The 613 part 6. We made it all the way to part 6. And in this series, we aim to discover how the laws of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, that are often set aside by most Christian churches, still apply to us today in 2024. And this morning I had a question from someone in the congregation, and it's a good question. How did we come to make this series? Why did we come to this understanding? And I just want to clarify how it all started. I remember because we have so many teachings here at House of Adonai on why is the law still good today? Why are we still to follow it? So these teachings we have many passages, many teachings that teach on that. But then I brought up to Jean and I said, Jean, maybe you should teach on the laws. How are we to follow them today? And he said, you know what, that's a good thing. Very good. And eventually, I came back to Jean and I said, hey, Jean, I want to teach on that. And he said, well, actually, I thought you should do the teaching on the 613 laws. Maybe that would be good for you. So here I am today on part 6, and this is how it all started, okay? Just to put a little bit of context. So as I said, in this series, we aim to discover how the law still applies to us today. And so far, we have seen 139 laws of the 613, which makes 22.67% of the whole laws. So I'm going to try to go through all of them in this series. You might still be here for a while, as you can see. All right, so in this teaching, I will start with the most important law of the whole teaching, all right, that we will revise today. And it is this one found in Exodus 20, verse 12. It's honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. So this is important to note that this is the first commandment that comes with the promise in the 10 words, the 10 commandments. And we must obey our parents, we must respect them. This is how we ensure that we will prosper, that we will live a long life. And but what if your father is not a believer? What if your father tells you to go against the word of God? Well, God comes first, so you got to put him first. And if your parents need to be disobeyed in order that you have to obey your Creator, your Father in heaven, then this is what you need to do. He always comes first. So when we read, honor your father and your mother, well, your Father in heaven is also their Father, so you need to honor them first. All right, but nowadays, children do not listen to their parents. And our parents did not listen to their parents. And their children are not obeying their parents also. So we are left with a generation that is disobedient to their parents. And this is exactly what was prophesied in 2 Timothy 3, 1-5. It says, but understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeased, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying the power. Isn't that suiting for today's generation, right? Everyone is so self-centered with their phone out taking selfies, but we don't see them honoring their parents. We have a generation that is dying sooner and sooner also, so we can see that the Word of God is true. So if it is you, if you are in a bad term, in a bad relationship with your parents, you might want to reconcile, you might want to make it right because, it's for your own self. There's a promise in the commandment where we need to honor our fathers and mothers. And, if you obey it, you will have a long life. So no matter what they did to you, no matter the relationship, the history, in the past, they are your father. And you have a mother, so it's always a good thing to try to make it right. All right, so we will jump in the next commandment, which is also linked to the first one that we saw. It's Exodus 21:15-17. And he who strikes his father or mother shall surely be put to death. And he who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. All right, maybe you have not hit your father. I hope you didn't. I didn't. I was getting hit. But I sure did curse my father and my mother at the time. And you see, this is deserving of death, according to God, how important it is that we must not do it. And in the times where, in the first century, in the time of Yeshua, if you would go back in these days, parents were very respected. All right, the authority of the father of the house was undisputed. And, we had a teaching here by Jean where he was explaining the prodigal son, where the sons, both sons, they treat the father with no respect. And back in the days, why it resonated so much with the first century believers at that time, the Jews that were hearing the story, the parable, is because the authority of the father was so established that when they heard that one son asked for his inheritance, people were astonished that someone would disrespect their father like that. And this is what brought the parable home, the point home so well. But nowadays, if you would, tell the same parable today, people would just listen and be like, "Oh, he asked for inheritance today. I guess he wanted to make an investment," or something like that. People don't really respect their parents like they used to. So, if the fear, it says in the word, it says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, right? And if the fear of our Father in heaven is the beginning of wisdom, then maybe the fear of our parents on earth is also wisdom. Let's read 19:3, Leviticus. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father and keep my Sabbath. I am Yahweh your Elohim. So here, keeping the Sabbath is linked with fearing your parents, revering them, respecting them. And sometimes when you will tell Christians that you are following the Sabbath, they will say, "Hold on, you're just being legalistic. This is like, what is the point anyways? I can worship on Monday, you can worship on Wednesday. What do you have to do it on that special day, on the seventh day?" Well, it's because our Father said so. So of course we can worship, we can gather together every day of the week and pay homage to Him every day. But He asked us to do it on the seventh day, and we do it because we revere our Father. If your Father tells you, come son, I want to meet you on Monday, and you better be there, and you said you don't show up, and then you show up the next day, you said, "Well, I showed up, I was there." Well, your Father might be disappointed because He wanted you to show up on a specific day, but you chose to honor another day. Maybe because of tradition. Maybe you have a tradition that you want to honor. You wanted to go another day. And we can't let the traditions of man get in the way of honoring our Father. And this is what Yeshua came to dispute. When you see in the Bible Yeshua appearing to break the Sabbath or rebuke Pharisees for keeping the law, what he's doing, he's not breaking the Sabbath. He's breaking the man-made rules that were made around the Sabbath. He's correcting the Pharisees about man-made laws that they have added around the law of God, thus making the law of God void. All right? So Christians nowadays, they keep 9 commandments out of the 10 commandments. They say the Sabbath is only for the Jews. But it says, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. So our Father wants us to remember Him, to remember the Sabbath and respect Him. And if you are here, well, congratulations, you've made it. So, mother and father implies a married couple. Alright, so in Genesis 2:24, we can read, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall cling to his wife, and they shall be as one flesh." So here we have the word father, mother, and wife. So it's singular, it's not plural. So if you see, even in the beginning in Genesis, the intent was never to have multiple wives. And when we see, for example, King David having multiple wives, well, we see also that there's a lot of drama, a lot of sin, a lot of grief that came through having multiple wives. Abraham having concubines and wives. But the thing is, why did they do that? Was it blessed by Elohim to have multiple wives? Not necessarily. This is what man did anyway. So Elohim, our Father, He had to regulate this in a way that it would be fair. And also, you have to understand that that back in these days, in ancient time, the more children you have, the more your name was established. So if you had 30 children, then you had a strong house. All right. If you had 2 children that died, no big deal, because you had 28 children that would carry on your name. So the more children you have, the more your house was powerful, the more your family was powerful. And this is why man had many wives, to have as many babies as possible, because one man can make a lot of babies, but one woman can make one every year. That's why they had multiple women. But God did not permit that. You see, God, He prioritized quality over quantity. And I think this is His point. So this is why it's one wife, one husband, and the kid will soon leave their parents to join himself to his wife and become one flesh. So you see, our Creator, He regulates things that are imperfect. Actually, Paul talks about it in the Scriptures. He says that, the law is not for the righteous. The law is for sinners, thieves, murderers, and all this, because the law, its regulations around imperfections. All right? And in a perfect world, these things would not exist. All right? And this is something that people don't understand. They say, why would God regulate slavery, or why would God regulate polygamy? Well, it's because man would do it. So He would put boundaries in it that would make it fair, or more fair. So let's read here, Exodus 21:10. If he takes for him another, he will not reduce her food, her clothing, or her right to cohabitation. Now this is cohabitation. Now this is talking about having more than one wife. But is God permitting it? No. He's regulating it. So this is the difference here, because nowhere in the Tanakh will it say, in the Old Testament will it say, a man should have as many wives as he wants. This is not what God says. Actually, if you read into it, you can see that it says the opposite. It says that a man should have one wife. And we have plenty of examples in the Old Testament to show us why we shouldn't have more than one wife. And this is later very explicitly specified in the New Testament. Right? So you're not going to have 10 children if you can't raise one properly. Okay? Same thing with wives. If God is saying here, if you're going to have one wife, treat her properly. If you're going to have 2 wives, treat them equally properly. So marriage is very sacred. Any sexual relationship outside of the bond of marriage between one male and one female human is seen as sexually immoral. So let's see here a good example in the New Testament here in John 8:39-41. It says, they answered and said, Abraham is our father. Yeshua said to them, if you are children of Abraham, do the deeds of Abraham. But now you are seeking to kill me, a man who spoke to you the truth which I heard from God. This Abraham did not do. You are doing these deeds of your father. They said to him, we are not born of sexual immorality. We have one God. So what are the Pharisees talking about here when they're saying to Yeshua, we are not born out of sexual immorality? It was because Mary, if you can recount in Matthew in the first few chapters, Mary, the mother of Yeshua, she was found pregnant while she was betrothed to Joseph. And, Joseph, he got a dream revealing that she was pregnant from the Holy Spirit, from the Fuad Kadesh. However, to those around Joseph, to those around Mary, they assumed that Mary was unfaithful, that she had a child outside of wedlock, because when you are betrothed in the Jewish customs, it was just as good as a marriage. It's just that you had not consummated it yet, because there were steps. There are steps to marriage, and the betrothing is the first step, somewhat. So this is why the Pharisees are telling Yeshua, they're saying, we were not born out of sexual immorality like you. So this is a good example that it was commonly understood that fornication, which is sex out of marriage, is sexual immorality, or having sexual relations with a man that is not your husband. All right? So a man can only take a wife through marriage. Let's see here a good example in Deuteronomy 24, 1-4. When a man takes a wife and marries her, then he sees, and she does not please him because he found something objectionable, and writes her a letter of divorce, and puts it in her hand, and sends her away from his house. She goes from his house, and she goes out and becomes the wife of another man, and the second man dislikes her, and he writes a letter of divorce and places it into her hand, and sends her from his house. Or if the second man dies, who took her to himself as a wife, and her first husband, who sent her away, is not allowed to take her again, to become his wife again, after she had been defiled, for that is a detestable thing before Yahweh. And so you shall not mislead into sin the land that Yahweh your Elohim is giving to you as an inheritance. Now, the thing when we read something objectionable right here, this is actually, it leaves it open to interpretation. What is objectionable? Well, Yeshua in the New Testament specifies it. He says it is only for sexual immorality. All right? But if you go back in the first century, you had two schools of thought. You had the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel. And this was one of their main disagreement about divorce, where the school of Shammai was more liberal, where if you would overcook her cheeseburger, you would be able to divorce her. But the school of Hillel was a lot more traditional, and they were seeing it more like Yeshua. They were saying it's only for sexual immorality that you can write a letter of divorce. So Yeshua specifies it after, and if you're wondering, in the first century, this is a lot of what was happening. Paul, the Apostle Paul, was under a student under Gamaliel, which was from the school of Hillel. Okay, the train of thought of Hillel. So Paul was a lot more conservative, if I may say it like that. But yes, it's really about sexual immorality here. Okay, so this is what is objectionable. It's not about if she puts too much salt in your fries. Okay, so let's see here. Just lose myself. Okay. So, and this is what Paul is saying right here. If he says, I think we used the old PowerPoint. I'm missing a slide, it's fine. Okay, so you see, here Paul is saying in 1 Timothy 1-8, it says, but we know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully. Alright? And this is, again, what is being said. Okay, so this is a good example. The law is good if you use it lawfully, because if you take it out of its context, we can use the law and make it seem bad, all right? And let's clarify that the law is a way of life. It is not there for our salvation, all right? It's like trying to buy your father's love with money. It's not compatible, right? Your father's love comes without a price, and it's the same thing with salvation, all right? So if we keep the law, if we obey our Father in heaven, it's not to obtain our salvation, but it is to show that we revere Him, that we love Him, all right? Let's see here. So I'm missing a couple slides here. Let me just see. Did I go through this? Okay. I'm sorry about that. I guess I skipped this slide. That was my bad. So here it says, so they said Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away. But Yeshua said he wrote this commandment because of your hardness of heart. But from the beginning of creation, he made them male and female, because of this man shall leave his father and mother and will be joined with his wife, and the two will become one flesh, so that they may no longer be two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, man must not separate. And in the beginning, the disciple began to ask him about this, and he said to them, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her, and if she divorces her husband and marries another one, she commits adultery. All right? So, this is a good example of the law of Christ. Okay, when you read the law of Christ, it comes up a couple of times in the scriptures. And most Christians like to interpret the law of Christ as being a new law that has set us free from the law of the Old Testament, but the law of Christ is just faith and love, whatever that means when you interpret it yourself. But you see, this is a good example of the law of Christ. It is the interpretation of the law by Christ. And this makes a lot more sense. This is all filtered through love, and not just going by the letter of the law, but by the Spirit. And this is what Paul is talking about again, is because you have to filter all of the law and all of the obedience through love. It cannot be done just to obey, because if you keep all of the commandments, but you neglect your neighbor, well, you have become guilty of breaking the whole law, right? Okay, so this we already read right here because I skipped through it. Okay, so here let's read a Google search. I like to Google things. And it says here, in 2023, the divorce rate in the United States is approximately 2.4 per 1,000 population. First marriage still end in divorce at a rate of approximately 35 to 50%. While second marriage faced an even more higher likelihood of dissolution, ranging from 60% to 70% or more. So we have a lot of divorces in this world today. Most marriages actually do not last very long. They go in divorce, and we wonder why. It's because people have defined what love is with their own interpretation. This is why we must go back to the roots. We must go back to the Word to guide us. And it may not be for salvation, but also to save you a lot of trouble. All right? So let's read here in Deuteronomy 24, verse 5. When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out with the army, and he shall not be obligated with anything. He shall be free from obligations to stay at home for 1 year, and he shall bring joy to his wife that he took. So I'm under that law right now, because I've been married for less than a year, so I can't leave the house. Good news, I work from home, we're safe.
All right. Bring me joy.
You can talk to her later. All right. But yeah, so you see, marriage, it's all about love, and the law is about love. It's all about fair treatment of your fellow human, and this is what we're reading right here. This sets the rules for marriage, because so many men would be called to war, and Not in a theocracy that follows the law of our Creator. No, that would not take place. The men would be left at home. They would be able to look after their children and wife, and all of that, right? Often the wife would be pregnant at that time because that's how it worked back in the days. More children you had, the better your house was. So, let's continue here. Okay, so here we're going to fall into the hard part of this teaching. And we're going to define exactly what sexual immorality is according to our Creator. Alright, so let's read in Leviticus 18, 6 to 18. Okay, none of you is to come near anyone who is a close relative to uncover their nakedness. I am Adonai. You are not to uncover the nakedness of your father or your mother. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. And when they say uncover the nakedness, they mean having sexual relations. So this is forbidden here. So you are not to uncover the nakedness of your father's wife, for it is your father's nakedness. You are not to uncover the nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father, the daughter of your mother, whether born at home or elsewhere. You are not to uncover the nakedness of your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, for theirs is your own nakedness. You are not to uncover the nakedness of the daughters of your father's wife, conceived by your father, since she is your sister. You are not to uncover the nakedness of your father's sister, for she is your father's direct relative. You are not to uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, for she is your mother's direct relative. You are not to uncover the nakedness of your father's brother by approaching his wife, for she is your aunt. You are not to uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law, for she is your son's wife. You are not to uncover her nakedness. You are not to uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife, because that is your brother's nakedness. You are not to uncover the nakedness of both a woman and her daughter. You are not to take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness, for they are direct relatives. That is wickedness. You are not to marry your wife's sister to be a rival, uncovering her nakedness while her sister is still alive. So, for those who think that the law of Moses has been done away with, we have some explaining to do. All right. I think every Christian would agree that these laws still apply today, but yet that's not what we find in the churches. God defines what is sexually immoral right here. So it's very simple. If she's your sister, no candles at dinner. All right, Leviticus 18:19. You are not to approach a woman to uncover her nakedness while she is in her impurity of her nida. For those who wonder what nida means, just think about, I need a break. So it means menstruation. And God, He's got a purpose for every law that He gives us. Sometimes it's for our health, sometimes it's for our happiness, sometimes it's for our holiness. So it's to set us apart. In this situation here, we can see, if we do a Google search, you will see here it says, in Israel, the cervical cancer rate is one of the lowest in the Western world, which goes to show it goes to show here, in Israel, cervical cancer is not prevalent, and the incident rate, number of new cases, are among the lowest in the Western world. So we know that it's most likely related to the laws, where you have these laws restricting sexual relations in between husband and wife at certain times of the month. All right, and we have the statistic that speaks for themselves. So, is there a link? You tell me. I think there is one. All right, let's continue. Here, Leviticus 18, 20 and 22. You are not to lie sexually with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. You are not to lie with a man as with a woman. That is an abomination. Again, almost virtually all Christians would agree. Maybe not the new churches, the new progressive churches that defy openly these commandments that are found in the New and the Old Testament. But this is why the world is under judgment right now, because we are comparable to Sodom and Gomorrah. When we look at the society today, how things are getting out of hand, how what is good has been called, what is bad has been called good, and what is good has been called bad. This is the enemy's plan to make us suffer the curses of Deuteronomy 28:29, where God says, if you don't follow my law, you will suffer the consequences. But if, in contrast, if you follow my law, you will reap all the blessings. All right, let's read here in Leviticus 18:23. You are not to lie with any animal to defile yourself with it, nor is any woman to give herself to an animal to lie down with it. That is a perversion. Do not defile yourself in any of these things. For in all these ways the nations which I am casting out before you were defiled. The land has become defiled, so I will punish it. I will punish its iniquity, and the land will vomit out its inhabitants. You will, however, keep my statutes, my ordinances, and do none of these abominations, neither the native born nor the outsider dwelling among you, for all these things, all of these abominations were done by the man of the land that were before you, and the land became defiled. If you defile it, the land will vomit you out, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. For whoever does any of these detestable things, the souls that do them are to be cut off from the midst of their people. Therefore, you are to keep my charges, that you do not practice any of these detestable customs that were practiced before you, so that you do not defile yourselves by them. I am Adonai your Elohim. So it cannot be any more clearer than that. These laws about sexual relations are prohibited. And if we look here, what happens when humans actually break these laws, we end up with things like the HIV virus. If we read here, this is again Google search, that you can do yourself also. It says, HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, likely originated from a type of virus in chimpanzees called the simian evil. No, I'm not getting here. I'm not going here. So virus, it's SIV. It is believed that to have crossed species from chimpanzees to human in the Congo around 1920. And as most of you might know, AIDS, HIV, is sexually transmitted. So this goes to show, that there are consequences, there are curses, and to this day, this virus is still plaguing the world today. You're wondering, why is there so much cancer today? Why was there no such things in previous times and all that? Well, all the things that people put in their bodies, we don't question it too much, but it's not very healthy to eat certain things. And if you look at what was permitted in God's Word to eat, those things are very good for you. That's just food for thought. Now let's review a passage that people who believe that the law is not to be followed by Christians in 2024 will always go to. Alright, so it's found here, Deuteronomy 22, 28 to 29. It says, if a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her, they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver, and he must marry the young woman, for he has by law violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. Yikes. Really? You think God would reward rape with a wife? That's not very likely. I think if you take the position that, look, this is the Old Testament law and it's unrighteous, then you're saying that God was unrighteous, but he changed his mind further down in the book. That doesn't make sense. We have to look at it from a brighter light. Okay, so let's look at it here. So the word that is translated as rape in this passage, it does not mean rape. Okay, it means to lie with. This is the word. The word is shakab. Yes. Just yes. So it's shakab. Okay, and it means to lie with. Here you can see. This is the biblical usage, but it has been translated as rape, and of course this is very questionable. Why would God, reward a rapist? Because if we look just a verse before, actually just a few verses before, right before, we can see here in Deuteronomy 22, 23 to 27, suppose that there is a young woman who is a virgin engaged to a man, and another man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you are to bring them both out to the gate of the city and stone them with stone to death. The young woman, because she did not cry out in the town, and the man, because he humiliated his neighbor's wife. So you are to purge the evil from your midst. But if, out in the country, a man happens to meet a young woman, pledged to be married, and rapes her, only the woman who has done this shall die. Do nothing to the woman. She has committed no sin deserving death. This case is like that of someone who attacks and murders a neighbor, or the man found the woman out in the country and brought the betrothed woman, screamed. There was no one to rescue. Now, basically the law says that this is actually talking about rape. And what we just saw before was right after that. So it talks about rape, and then it talks about something that they translated as rape. But if we look here, when in the context of true rape, there is laws in place. They didn't have cameras back then, so the woman needed to scream or to report it right away. She needed to confront the rapist. She couldn't just ignore it, and this was her responsibility because you didn't have cameras back then. And even today, sometimes it happens outside of the side of cameras. So, what is the word here? If I said that the word shakab was to lie with in the previous example, here then it should be different. Well, here, if we look, it says here, hazak shakab. Okay, so this is the word to lie with. But hazak means force to lie with. All right, and this is what we are finding in that passage. It's that the word translated as rape in that passage is actually rape, because it's saying that the woman has been forced to lie with. All right, so this is the difference, and this is a mistranslation that most of you should know. And this is why we're reviewing it today, because I assure you that whenever you will testify that we need to keep the law to someone who knows the Bible, they will jump there like their pants are on fire. Okay? And they will try to make you look foolish for following the law, because the law is barbaric in their sight, right? But most of the misconceptions come from taking verses out of context or mistranslations that were done by the translators. By the way, most translations that you have in your Bibles today, they come from the Latin Vulgate, dating 400 years after Yeshua. And this was translated in Latin to English. So you're losing a lot of the Hebraic meaning of the word when you're reading in your Bibles today. All right? Now that makes a lot more sense, right? So if we go back in the verse, okay, so yes, so if we go back in the verse that we were there before, so it's saying that the word to lie with It's actually to seduce. So if we look back at the verse before, yes. So sorry. So this is the word that we just saw before. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So if you go back to the verse before, where it shows to lie with, the rapist is not rewarded with the wife. What it shows is that if a woman, a virgin who is not betrothed to someone, sleeps with a man, then he will need to approach the father and marry her. And if the father doesn't want, then he needs to pay the full dowry. All right, and this is what we're looking at, and that makes a lot more sense in that light. It's actually righteous. So it's saying, look, if they have had sex out of wedlock, then and he needs to marry her. And if the father refuses because he doesn't like the guy, then that's his right. All right, and it's not rewarding rape with a wife. That would be immoral. All right, so hopefully I don't get lost here. Okay, so what is rape? Let's read here in Deuteronomy 22, 23 to 27. Suppose there is a young woman who is a virgin engaged to a man, and another finds her in the city. So we just read that, didn't we? Yeah. Hold on. Am I repeating myself already? Hold on. I need to look at my pages. See, I knew I would do that. I lost myself.
I think your slides are wrong.
Yeah. I should have numbered them.
We didn't read Deuteronomy 22, 1 through 18.
Did we? Okay, let's improvise then. Was it what you were reading here?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so let's read this here.
Never mind your papers, just all the slides.
Yes? Yes. Okay.
It's probably your best bet now.
Okay. No pressure. Alright, so if a man takes a wife after sleeping with her and dislikes her, and slanders her and gives her a bad name, saying, I married this woman, but when I approached her I did not find her proof of virginity, then the young woman's father and mother shall bring to the town elders at the gate proofs that she was a virgin. And her father will say to the elders, I gave my daughter in marriage to this man, but he dislikes her. Now he has slandered her, and say, I did not find your daughter to be a virgin. But here is the proof of my daughter's virginity. So they have the virginity cloth that they would show that this was an awkward condition, but it worked. And then her parents shall display the cloth before the elders of the town, and the elders shall take the man and punish him. He shall fine him under 100 shekels of silver and give them to the young woman, his father, because this man has given an Israelite virgin a bad name. She shall continue to be his wife. He must not divorce her as long as he lives. If, however, the charge is true and no proof of the young woman's virginity can be found, she shall be brought to the door of the father's house, and there the man of her town shall stone her to death. She has done an outrageous thing in Israel by being promiscuous while still in her father's house. You must purge the evil from among you. Yikes. Yes, so it was very, very intense, back then, the punishment. I just want to let you know, there was a process that needed to be followed. They needed to bring the accused to the elders at the gates, and the elders had the burden of inspecting the matter very carefully. And by the way, this was the worst case scenario, and you can see it. You can see it in the story of Joseph. That when you read about the capital punishment in the scriptures, they're always outlining the worst case scenario where where someone would be put to death. But that it was not always this way. Sometimes the elders at the gates would decide that the punishment, death punishment, would be too much. It would be too intense for the situation, because as we know, we're humans and there's different situations. Life is complicated. So this is why there were elders at the gates who were commanded to be impartial, and they needed to study the situation carefully, and then they would bring out a judgment. And if they would carry out the capital punishment, then the law actually says that the accusers would put their head on the accused, and they would cast the first stone. And no sin would be upon their hand, no blood would be upon their hand, because they have followed the law. And by the way, this is the only way that capital punishment is acceptable. All right, it is not acceptable in any other ways if it's not to the T how it was explained or commanded in the scriptures. And we see an example of this here in Matthew 1:18-19. It says, "This is how the birth of Yeshua the Messiah came about, and his mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph. But before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law, and yet did not want to expose her public disgrace. He had in mind to divorce her quietly." So this is a clear example of Joseph avoiding the worst case scenario and trying to divorce her quietly. So you see, the punishments didn't fit the crime. Okay, so as we can see, even though the evidence was there to point that Mary was unfaithful, Joseph knew Mary. He knew she was a good woman. He knew her personality. He did not want to defame her, to bring trouble and shame on her name. Right? Because this is what it means to give her a bad name. So he wanted to do it quietly. And this is a good example of the law being applied in a not as severe way in the scriptures, because here we can see that Joseph was obeying the law, and yet he did not want to carry out the worst case scenario. Thank you, Joseph, for that. And so here, let's continue in Leviticus 20, verse 10. "If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, with the wife of her neighbor, both of the adulterer and the adulteress are to be put to death." So, key word, both. All right, you could not just have one of them. And if this law was enforced today, would you see as many adulterers, adulteresses today? No, of course not. No, actually, people are rewarded nowadays. You can have a married couple, and then someone commits adultery, and then they separate, and they take half of everything. You see, like, it's almost encouraged nowadays in today's society. This is why we have such a high rate of divorce, and we have such a, and even in the younger generation, if you look in the younger generation, I hear testimonies from people that, like, everyone is cheating. Almost everyone is cheating on their boyfriend and girlfriend. And, well, here it's very, very hard to hear, because, this is sacred. But we do not live in a world today where the law of the land is the law of God, and we are suffering the consequences. There is a lot of injustice in the world, but this law was definitely superior morally back in the days that it was given, and to this day we can see how it applies today. And this is why we're doing this right here. So some people will say, well, hold on, Fred. Yeshua in John, in the book of John, he abolished that law because of the woman caught in adultery. All right, so let's read in John 8, 1-11. "But Yeshua went to the Mount of Olives at dawn. He came again into the temple, and the people were coming to him, and sat down, and he began teaching them. The Torah scholars and the Pharisees bringing a woman who had been caught in adultery after being caught in adultery. After putting her in the middle, they said to Yeshua, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of committing adultery. in the Torah, Moses has commanded to stone such women. So what do you say? Then they were saying this to trap him, so that they would have ground to accuse him. All right. So this is what most Christians are reading over. They're not reading that part. Okay. So they're actually trying to trap him right here. Okay. So that they might be able to accuse them. Why? Well, why? It's because there's only the woman caught in adultery. You're missing the man. And also, you're missing the elders at the gates. Why? Why are we missing the elders at the gates? Well, I'll give you an example. You know, Yeshua, when he was crucified, the Pharisees, they went to the authorities, the Roman authorities, to have the capital punishment carried out, because it was illegal for the Jews to carry out capital punishment without Rome to be involved. So this is why you could not follow the law of Moses the way that Moses had prescribed it. And so with someone as famous as Yeshua, the Pharisees had no opportunity to just stone Yeshua to death. They had to go through Pilate. They had to go to the Roman authorities to carry out the capital punishment. But then, if you look at Stephen in the book of Acts, he got stoned to death by the same people, the same Pharisees. Why? Well, it's because the Pharisees were breaking the law left and right when it suited them. They were taking the law into their own hands. You see, Stephen, not being a public speaker like Yeshua did for a long time, he was not as known, he was not as famous, and it was easy for them to just kill him, murder him. And this is what they did. They murdered Stephen, and they stoned him to death, using the law of Moses as an excuse to break the law of Moses. And this is exactly what we're seeing him. The scholars and the Torah teachers, they're bringing a woman caught in adultery to Yeshua, trying to trap him, to have grounds to accuse him. All right? And what is Yeshua doing then? Did Yeshua say, stone the woman? Funny fact, if you read in the Chinese Bibles that the Chinese government translates for the Chinese people, Yeshua actually goes and throws the first stone. All right? But no, in the true scriptures, we can see that here it says, so they tried to trap him that they might have grounds to accuse him. But Yeshua knelt down and started writing in the dirt with his own finger. When they kept asking him, he stood up and raised and said, "The sinless one among you, let him cast the first stone." Then he knelt down again and continued writing in the ground. Now when they heard it, they began to leave one by one, the oldest first, until Yeshua was left alone with the woman in the middle. Straightened up, Yeshua said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Yeshua said. "Go and sin no more." So did Yeshua change the law? No. Again, most of his ministry, he's correcting people who try to twist the law to their own advantage, to their own agenda. But did Yeshua have mercy on the woman? Of course he did. And this is not the point I'm trying to make. I'm not saying that he wanted the woman to die. He says, "Go and sin no more," showing his merciful side. And this is the grace that he extends to each and every one of us if we go and sin no more. We have to repent from our sin. We have to repent from the spiritual adultery that we have all committed here. And the stoning of the woman would have been lawful. It would have been unlawful that the capital punishment was carried out, as we have seen, because there was only the woman, it was not the man. And the accusers, who were they? They need to be 2 or 3 accusers, because every matter shall be established by the witness of 2 or 3 witnesses. All right? And, you know, we have here a very interesting fact here, okay? So, what was Yeshua writing in the ground? You know, he was kneeling and he was writing in the ground something, but it doesn't say what it was. Well, if you read in the next verse, actually, you get a very good hint of what Yeshua was writing in the ground. Let's see. in the next verse, it says, Yeshua spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. The one who follows me will no longer walk in darkness, but I have the light of life. Then the Pharisees said to him, you are testifying about yourself, so your testimony is not valid. So in the next verse, the Pharisees are trying to trap Yeshua with the law, saying that his testimony is not valid because he's alone. And then he goes on to say that I have heaven and earth as my witness. But what was he writing in the ground? Probably something that was related with what the Pharisees tried to trap him with. You see, he did not carry out the capital punishment because it was unlawful, because first you need the man and the woman, but also you need 2 or 3 witnesses to establish a matter. And this is probably what Yeshua was writing in the ground, because he gave the law. He is the lawmaker, therefore he knows the law, and he was probably writing it with his finger in the ground, because guess what? He wrote the 10 Commandments with his own finger. So here it says, Deuteronomy 17, verse 6, on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a person is to be put to death. But no one is to be put to death on the testimony of only 1 witness. And this is the point that Yeshua was trying to make when he was writing in the sand. And the Pharisees that were standing by probably saw that, and they tried to trap him with his own words. But every time I read the Gospels, I'm always amazed when I read in Matthew when Yeshua was in the temple and he just shuts down the Pharisees. Such intelligence displayed in his speech and his conversations with the Pharisees. I'm always amazed by that. Yes. Here, let's read we're going to go back to the topic of marriage. So if you want your marriage to be legitimate, you need also 2 or 3 witnesses to establish it before Elohim and before man. And this is how we know that a marriage is legitimate. So let's read here in Deuteronomy 23:18. You may not bring the hire of a prostitute or the earning of a male prostitute into the house of Yahweh, or any vow offering, because of both are detestable things to Yahweh or Elohim. So, prostitution comes in many forms. Alright? Here we can read in 1 Samuel 15:23, it says, for rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. So we can see here that rebellion is compared to witchcraft. Did I say that? No. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. So if that's the case, could we then say that compromise could be as the sin of prostitution? Right? That's just a little parallel that I drew there. Makes you think. So God, He hates prostitution. Here we have a law that is very hard to hear, all right? But you have to understand that the priests were to be set apart. They were to be consecrated to Elohim, and they were to live holy because they were the only ones who were in between man and Him to represent Him. And here we have a law that says if a priest's daughter defiles herself by becoming a prostitute, she disgraced her father, she must be burned with fire. Ouch. So the priests are responsible, the father is responsible for their children. So if a priest's daughter would become a prostitute in the house of her father, this was like a big slap in the face of Yah. And she was to be purged with fire. And this is very serious. The law of Moses is there to set us apart, and we cannot go and do what we want. So this just goes to show how God wants holiness, and when He anoints you, there is no going back. When He chooses you out of the world, there is no going back. There is no going back to your vomit, to prostitution. If you are in the family, in the holy house of Yah, you are to be holy, and you cannot go and prostitute yourself with all kinds of pagan things and compromises. So that's just, again, how it would apply today. Of course, the priesthood right here, it's not just the Levites, it's really the daughters of Aaron. Okay, so Aaron, which is the brother of Moses, they had the Levitical priesthood. Not the Levitical, yeah, they have the priesthood, which is just one family, basically. Okay, so you have one family, and they were Levites, which were the ones who were allowed to go in the temple and to do the temple duty. But here you have the priest, and the priests are even more set apart than even the Levites. They are the only ones who can step into the Holy of Holies. And this is once a year. It would happen on one day, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, where the sons of Aaron would go in the Holy of Holies, sprinkle the blood there to make atonement for the sins of the people for that year. And so this is why, again, if you were the daughter of a priest and prostituting yourself, you were defiling the father, because the father is responsible for the daughter, and you could not have that. That was to be completely forbidden. So when you see laws like this, you have to study the context, because of course you can imagine that no daughter of the priest would ever be prostitutes. They would be very foolish to do so. But that's not recorded in the scriptures. We never see an example of that happening in the scriptures afterward. And this is why we have to understand when God is serious about a law, when He says, look, you do that, you will die. Well, you can bet your hat that it was very rare that people would go to that extent to break the law. All right? And this is rebellion. Rebellion is as witchcraft. So anyways, let's continue here. Oh yeah, so that's a little, example of the law being somewhat applied before Moses. So here's the story of Judah, and Judah, his story is he's one of the sons of Jacob, great-grandson of Abraham, and he went along the way and found a prostitute, and he laid with her. And it was actually his daughter-in-law who had disguised herself, because, long story short, she was betrothed to the son of Judah. The son of Judah died, and she was betrothed to the other brother. He died, and then the father did not want to betroth her to the third son, because he said, hey, they both died, so maybe she's got a curse and she's going to kill my last son. Anyways, so eventually, let's read here in Genesis 38:24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant. Judah said, bring her out and have her burned to death. Now, if you read, you can see that she was not killed. In fact, she was found to be more righteous than Judah. Now, this is some kind of evidence that the law was there before the law of Moses, even if Judah twisted it in a sick way. But, men are not perfect. The law is perfect, and it's there to honor a perfect God. And sometimes we have a hard time wrapping our head around that. But in a way, Judah was even more guilty of prostitution than that woman, because he was, his hypocrisy, he was trying to have her killed for that. So this goes to show again that the law is for sinners. And we must not follow after the examples of people in the Bible. The only people that we should follow an example of is Yeshua. Okay, he is the only example that we should follow. And another parallel here with the law of burning prostitute is the fate of the great harlot in the book of Revelation. We will get to that eventually in the teaching about Revelation that our brother Jean is doing. But here, let's read in Revelation 17, 1, 16, and 18. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came to me. He said, come, I will show you how the great prostitute will be punished. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will destroy her and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. The woman you saw stand for the great city of Babylon. That city ruled over the king of the earth. And anyways, it goes to say that she's the great prostitute. So this is prophetic. It represents things. It's not a literal woman. But ultimately, that is the fate of the prostitute. It goes back to the law. She will end up her fate. It says here that she will be burned with fire. Poetic or sick? Ironic, maybe? Let's see. So, we will end with this in Deuteronomy 23:17 to 18. It says, "None of the daughters of Israel shall be a called prostitute, nor shall any of the sons of Israel be called prostitute. You shall not bring the hire of a harlot or the wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God, for any votive offering for both of these are an abomination to the Lord." So it's important to note that prostitution is a synonym with idolatry in the scriptures. We are not to have any other God before Him. In the same way, we should only have one partner as a husband or wife. So this concludes our teaching about the law of sexual relations or marriage. Thanks for being still here. We went through the hard parts. So in conclusion, we were at 22% of the law. We had seen 139 laws. Now we have seen more or less 44 laws in that teaching. And we are at 183 laws out of 613 laws. So we are at 85%. And just to resume, incest is bad, bestiality is bad, and 2 rings is a good thing. That's it for today.